Hermanos y hermanas, en la lectura en inglés, cuando nosotros escuchamos esta lectura de la profeta Ezequiel, nosotros escuchamos una palabra importante, y eso es la palabra wicked. El problema es no usamos esta misma palabra en español. Tenemos la palabra el malvado. Una poco diferencia, pero muy similar. Pero la diferencia es importante porque la lectura en primer y lectura del Evangelio tenemos siempre una relación. Cuando nosotros escuchemos muy bien que diga el profeta, nosotros podemos muy bien también porque Jesús diga como él se dice. My sisters and brothers, in the first reading there's an important word there that is very important to understand correctly so that the purpose of the first reading, which is to open up and to give a lens to the gospel, will make more sense because they both have the same theme. How do we respond to evil that is in the community? The word that we have in English, the word wicked, is very important, and its root is very important. The word we bring into English as wicked, we could often substitute there evildoer, which is essentially what's in Spanish, malvado. But the word wicked has a very particular derivation, and it's important in this particular context. Now, the word wizard, coming from Old and Middle English, sounds like what other word would you guess that also starts with a W? Wizard. Wizard not in the sense of Harry Potter, but in the sense of sorcerer or witch. Why is wizard being seen as evil? What is the problem theologically? ¿Por qué la palabra en inglés wicked es una relación de wizard o bruja? ¿Por qué es importante? Why is it important to hear about the wicked wizard? What does wizardry attempt to do? Not only to do evil, but do evil how? With supernatural power. As a result, it's a violation of the first commandment, right? Have no gods before me. It's the attempt to usurp the authority and the power of God. And so when you hear them condemning the wicked, what you're hearing is not only a violation of the first commandment, but also the condemnation of usurping the power of God. And so when you hear the prophet speaking, what he is saying in effect is those who are rebelling against God, there is a consequence. What is the consequence of sin? Death, as we all know. Es importante que la profeta diga cuando una persona acta en rebelión contra Dios es un pecado y la consecuencia del pecado es la muerte. Y esto claro cuando él diga a nosotros, el malvado morirá por su culpa. We hear that when the prophet says, the evildoer, the wizard, the wicked one will die for what they have done. Pero escucha también, pero yo te pediré a ti cuentas su vida. But I will hold, the prophet says, his life against you because you did not denounce the evil. Very important that we hear and understand correctly, it's not only the evildoer that is responsible, it is also the one who did not denounce the evil. And that's where we have to be very careful and look very carefully at how Jesus teaches us to respond to sin and the reality of sin in the community. Y por eso es importante nosotros escuchamos mucho atentamente a la palabra de Jesucristo cuando nosotros escuchemos cómo nosotros respondemos a la realidad del pecado en la comunidad de los creyentes. ¿Por qué? Claro que sí, nosotros sabemos muy bien la realidad del pecado es parte de la condición humana. Todos nosotros tenemos pecado en nuestra vida. En fato, nosotros aprendemos la misa con una confesión que nosotros somos pecadores. Yo pecado en palabra y mentir, yo palabra en obra y omisión. Jesus teaches us how are we to respond to sin and evil in the community. And we know, of course, that sin is a part of our reality. We even open Mass asking for God's pardon. I have sinned in my thoughts and in what I have and what I have failed to do. So we know that sin is a reality. The question is how do we respond to the reality of sin? Y por eso Jesús diga a nosotros claramente cuál es nuestra respuesta, cuál es nuestra acción. En primer diga Jesús, ve y amonéstalo a solas. It's wonderful the way the Spanish puts it. In English we hear, go and talk to him privately, go to him alone. In Spanish, it's more like go and warn him that this action, this behavior is destructive. But why alone? Why does Jesus say first go alone? What's the reason? ¿Por qué diga a solo? No en la comunidad. En primer diga Jesús, si tu hermano mete un pecado, ve y amonéstalo a solas. ¿Por qué solas? Why does Jesus have us begin with you and the one other alone? What does it preserve? You notice that Jesus didn't say go and tell it on Facebook. That was not Jesus' starting point. You notice that Jesus didn't say go and tell everybody else about it. He said go to the person alone. Why? Dignity. Because we don't want to create destruction in the community. We want to heal the community. We don't want to bring scandal, but rather restoration. Es importante, es solas porque preservar a la dignidad de la otra persona. Nosotros no queremos crear más escandaloso o destrucción de la persona o de la comunidad. Claro que sí, no es una oportunidad de continuar en la cosa mala, mas no es crear una cosa más malo también. It is only when we cannot repair the damage, does Jesus say, then go with 2 or 3 witnesses, quoting the law of Moses, that everything may be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. Es solamente cuando nosotros no podemos resolver privadamente, nosotros vamos, diga Jesús, a acompañar de una o 2 personas para que todo lo que se diga conste para boca de 2 o 3 testigos. Es en la ley de Moisés también. Es continuamente en privada, pocas personas. It's still reserved only to a few people to resolve the situation and to bring the person back into the community of faith, the community of believers, bringing them back to what it is God calls us to do. Es solo cuando esta continúa con un problema, nosotros vamos a la iglesia. Y aquí es importante. Diga Jesús, pero si ni te hace caso, díselo a la comunidad y ni a la comunidad le hace caso, apártate de él como un pagano o de un publicano. Es importante en la teología moral, cuando nosotros escuchamos, vamos a la comunidad, vamos a la iglesia, es importante nosotros realizamos no es la comunidad aquí, porque la moralidad de la iglesia no es privada y también no es local, es universal. It's important when we hear Jesus say, go to the church, that we're not talking about the local community, because we as a local community do not define in Catholic morality what is good or what is bad. It is the teaching of the universal church that informs us what is authentically moral and what is authentically not. So it's not a private action. This is a public question of what is moral and how do we respond to immorality among ourselves. Notice that Jesus says, if they will not hear even the teaching of the church, then do what? Treat them as you would, we hear in English, a Gentile or a tax collector. Y es importante nosotros realizamos de esta pregunta de moralidad. Es la moralidad de la iglesia, donde yo o nuestra comunidad es una cosa objetivo. Porque la moralidad es objetivo. El buen real es la persona de Jesucristo, quien es la verdad, la vida y la vía. Es cuando en este contexto nosotros escuchamos la realidad de todos nosotros, tenemos una responsabilidad de vivir en la vida de Cristo, en la vida del Evangelio. Y cuando una persona refutar esto también, nosotros actamos con la persona es pagano o un publicano. And so if we're going to say, treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector, we have to see, what does Jesus do? How does Jesus treat tax collectors and Gentiles in the gospel? What do we hear Jesus doing? Think to all the stories you hear in the gospel. What's the word you never hear? Starts with a C. Never hears condemns. Never does Jesus condemn the Gentiles or the tax collectors. He instead invites them to conversion. He invites them to change their way of living, and the same way we are called to do the same, to invite people to change the way they are living, to return to the life and the teaching of the church. Es importante que Jesucristo en el Evangelio nunca acta con condenación a los paganos ni también a los publicanos. Siempre ir a la invitación a regresar a la comunidad de Israel, de convertir el modo de vivir. En el mismo modo, nosotros debemos hacer lo mismo. Porque todos nosotros tenemos pecado en nuestra vida. Y todos nosotros debemos regresar a la comunidad de creyentes e invitar a otros también a regresar. Y regresar a la vida del Evangelio, regresar a la vida de los sacramentos, regresar a la comunidad de creyentes. It is in that mindset that we are called not to ignore evil. Neither the prophets nor Jesus tell us to give a free pass to bad behavior. We're called, yes, to confront what is evil and what is contrary to God, but to do so in a way that invites people to conversion and growth, repentance and change, because if we are missing people, our community is incomplete. If people have left us, our community is incomplete, and we are calling them back to make our community whole once again. Es importante porque cuando nosotros no tenemos todas las familias, toda la gente, nuestra comunidad no tiene todos. Entonces, nosotros no tenemos la plena comunidad. Nosotros debemos llamarlos a regresar, llamarlos a convertir, llamarlos a arrepentirse y recontinuar la vida cristiana. This also goes directly to how we understand as Catholics the eighth commandment, not to perjure yourself or tell things falsely about your neighbor. If you've never read the Catechism on the eighth commandment, I encourage you to do so. Just go to Google, just type in Catechism of the Catholic Church. It'll pop right up in English on the Vatican website. You can scroll down to the Ten Commandments, click on the eighth commandment, and see how broad this commandment really is. Es importante, hermanos y hermanas, de este evangelio también es en relación al decálogo, el ocho comandamientos del decálogo, el mandamiento de no hablará falso contra su prójimo. Cuando nosotros vamos a la catequismo y leemos, la realidad de este mandamiento es muy grande y más grande de nosotros pensamos. Porque la acción de la lengua también causa el pecado. And that's because our tongue causes us to sin and gets us in trouble. Think, for example, what do you see on social media? How much do you see people talking about other people's lives? It's called gossip, in case you're wondering. And did you know the church teaches that it's sinful? Or how often do you see people deriding others or speaking badly about them? Church teaches that's sinful. And now not only have you done it, you've done it publicly. So you've gone from sin to grave sin, to serious sin. Again, it's not that we should allow evil behavior, but how we confront it is on us and is important to who we are as a Christian community. Guarda en el Facebook y otros media social cuando nosotros escuchemos o leemos el chisme sobre los otros. Esto es un pecado. Guarda y lea la condenación de la otra persona. Eso es pecado grave, porque no es solamente público, es un escándalo. Es una cosa importante, porque es pecado grave. La importancia, hermanos y hermanas, es nosotros debemos realizar la realidad del pecado en la comunidad y confrontar, a confrontar en el modo de Cristo, no en el modo del mundo. Nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad como cristianos a decir y proclamar en la verdad y en el amor la verdad de Cristo. Pero no en el modo de condenación, no en el modo de chisme, no en un modo de crear escándalo o de destrucción de una otra persona, pero a llamarlo de regresar, llamarlo a arrepentirse y continuar con nosotros, porque nosotros debemos otras personas de ayudarnos de vivir más auténticamente. When we create the scandal, when we create the destruction and the derision of other people, we only foster division and discord. We must, as Catholics and as Christians, name what is evil as evil. That is a true statement. We must confront the reality of sin in our own lives and in our society, but not in a way that derides or condemns or treats people without charity, but in a way that invites them to return to the fullness of the faith and the life of the church. Because when we are lacking those people who have gone astray, our community is also lacking. And we need them to return to challenge us in our life. We need them to return to challenge us in our faith, so that we together, as a believing community, filled ever more fully with the life of Christ, are able to also more fully, more truthfully, more completely announce the good news to all people.